Her Sports Six Nations Show in association with Opel.
Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Her Sports Six Nations Show, brought to you in association with Opel, the exclusive car partner to the IRFU. You can catch up on this episode and every episode in the series on YouTube and our social channels, or listen to the podcast on every podcast app. For our final competition, we are giving you 2 tickets to see Ireland take on Scotland at the Kingspan Stadium in Belfast this weekend, and a signed Irish Rugby jersey. For your chance to win, answer this question. Who did Hannah Tyrrell make her international debut against in 2015? Comment below with the answer and we'll pick our winner tomorrow, and comment your answers on Instagram and Twitter with the hashtag HerSports6Nations. The winner of last week's competition for 2 tickets to the Ireland and Scotland game was Lolly Murray. We'll be in contact with you shortly to give you the tickets for the game. So Hannah, at the game at the weekend, Ireland's, I suppose, biggest match yet was against England, with the final score being 69-0. What did you make of the game?
Well, I suppose first thing to mention is that I don't think the scoreline really reflected how the game actually went. I was really, really impressed by Ireland's first half performance. They did go into the halftime break 10-0 down, but I was just so impressed by the defensive shift.
I think everyone was shocked at that first half score.
But the defensive shift, the passion, Nicole Cronin had to go off injured early on, and Enya Breen moved into the 10 position, her first start in the Six Nations. She wouldn't be a natural 10, but even a couple of minutes after that, she won a big turnover by forcing a knock on, and she let out a huge roar and a huge scream, and you could just see they were so up for this match. And I suppose you don't need much to get up when you're playing, when you're playing against England, but it was just great to see that the defensive effort was massive. To keep a team like England, who are the best team in the world, have been scoring tries for fun lately, to 10-0 at halftime for this Irish side, coming in completely depleted of sevens players and a couple of others like Sam Monaghan, was a massive result. Now, unfortunately, in the second half, they just couldn't keep up with that.
Do you think that was just tiredness at the end of the day?
Look, it's a bit of both. They put in a huge shift. It's obviously energy draining. When you're defending all the time, it does take a lot out of you. England probably weren't at their best that first half. Some of that, because Ireland forced them into mistakes, but others was just unforced errors they wouldn't usually make, and they kind of rectified that in the second half. I've no doubt they had a bit of a talking to at halftime. The English bench really came through in the second half. I think their bench scored 4 tries, and just their depth, their experience, it all came through. And again, unfortunately, Ireland's penalty count and errors caught up with them. We had two cards in the second half, and so we were playing with a man down. That's physically and mentally draining, and that all takes its toll. And unfortunately, we let England in. They scored 11 tries in total, 9 in the second half, and that is quite deflating. But I'm sure the girls are extremely proud of the performance they put in the first half. It's just now looking ahead to Scotland. How can we do that for 80 minutes or for 70 minutes and really nail Scotland so that they have no chance of getting back into the game?
And what do you think the positives from their performance were? Obviously, England, as you said, weren't at their best, and they did capitalise on that with their defending. But then, was there any players that stood out for you as well? Niamh Jones had a good game. Molly Scruffle-McCabe starting. What did you make of her as well?
Yeah, look, I think the positive in general is that whole first half, because we actually had opportunities. We were camped inside the English 22 for a couple of minutes as well. We missed a penalty. We could have got on the board. So they're hugely positive moments. As I said, a lot of big hits coming in defence. Our shape was really good. They're all hugely positive things for Ireland to take on into the Scotland game. In terms of individual performances, I thought Adele McMahon was absolutely exceptional. Highest tackler, 22 tackles on the day. She got a couple of turnovers. Niamh Jones, the same, put in some huge dominant hits.
She got a lot of turnovers in the first half there as well.
Look, rightly so. Her clip of her tackle on Helena Rowland, who was brilliant at the weekend, has gone viral because it was a textbook tackle. She lined her up, she picked her up, she drove her back and drove her into the ground. And they're kind of they're game changers. You know, when you can have a player like that who can turn the tide on a hugely important player in Roland playing at 15, like be able to knock her backwards, that kills all the momentum of that English side, and that was huge. I really thought Niamh Jones has stepped up. I was maybe a little bit critical and harsh of her throwing in the first few games, but her work in the loose has been exceptional. You know, prior to the England game, I think she'd made 100% of her tackles, 50 of them so far, and I think she made another 16 or 17 at the weekend. She's been an incredible find, so young. I thought Molly Scuffle-McCabe did really well in the first half. She put Lydia Thompson over the line, which again gives that huge energy and a huge boost to the team. Like 9 times out of 10, Lydia Thompson scores in the corner there. Extremely fast, extremely physical, and for Molly on her first cap to put in that big tackle and force her over the line was massive. I think she'll be a little disappointed with her second half performance, particularly her tackling. But again, you have to remember, Ireland were extremely tired at that point. We were, you know, we'd had a couple of cards. We were down a man for most of the game, or down a player for most of the game, and that kind of comes to it. But like, look, it was her first cap. A lot of learnings, a lot of good things, and I just think as a whole, you know, that it was great to see that performance in the first half, and now it's how do we make that to last longer than 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And then there was obviously a lot of interesting talking points in the game. You mentioned there the cards, but before we even touch on that, there was a point at one point, a punch, as Nicola Friday called it, to Michelle Claffy. What did you make of that?
Yeah, look, I think, you know, so it was Leanne Infante at the time. England had a penalty. She tried to take a quick dove over the line. Michelle Claffy's trying to hold her up, as any player would do. They seem to have gotten like entangled, so Michelle was trying to kind of get up, and I suppose Leanne thought she wasn't getting up quick enough, and she reacted. And that's a thing that as a player you can't let get to. You can't react to things like that. For me, it deserved at least a card. It is she has reacted, she has reached out, she has connected. Couldn't quite see whether it was more of like a slap or a push. I say push because it was more than a push. But like, I'm not quite certain if it was a punch because I couldn't see the closed fist. But for me, she's reacted angrily for no reason. And it's a minimum of a yellow card for me, because you have to stamp that out of a game. We don't want to see players getting into fights or anything else like that, and that just needs to be stamped out. Michelle was only trying to do what any player would do and try and prevent a try, and she gets that reaction from it. I think that shows, sorry now, but I think that shows how frustrated the English side were, and how well Ireland were doing to get in their heads, because if England were winning 30 or 40-0 and everything was going right, I don't think she reacts like that. But the fact that Ireland had frustrated them for most of that half and things weren't going the way they usually go for England, she was frustrated and she was annoyed that she didn't score that, or that the ref didn't let that go.
I think Nicola Friday there kind of stepped up and really saying to the ref, because it would have probably gone overlooked as well. And she really, I think, has shown her leadership even in that game, even when they were losing halftime. I don't know what was said in the Irish dressing room, but it was probably all good considering they got that 10-0 scoreline there.
Yeah, look, again, it's her first year as captain. There is a lot of learnings there. You know, you need to be able to focus on your own game, but also, can you lead your team around you? Are you able to speak to the ref? And I do think she was right to speak to the ref, because for me, the ref was letting it go. I don't think she saw it, in fairness, but TMO hadn't picked up on it either. And if Nicola hadn't gone and said to the ref, I think you need to look at that, because Claffy, in fairness to her, didn't actually react. Mm-hmm. You know, many other players could have rolled around and feigned that, you know, she'd been absolutely thumped there, but she didn't, in fairness to her. But Nicola just wanted to make sure the ref saw that. And penalty was reversed, but I think it should have been more. And we saw then later in the game again, when we saw cards being dished out, Nicola was trying to reason, trying to get you know, the explanation from the referee as to why certain things were happening and why calls had been made. And that is great to see. And it shows that she has learned from this campaign and that she will only continue to grow and improve as the leader and as a captain for this team.
And then we've seen, obviously, Dorothy Walls' yellow card. A lot of people probably would have seen on Jess Breech's Instagram the cut. It was quite a deep cut that she got as well. What did you make of that? And do you think the yellow card was right to be given?
Yeah, look, it was a bad clash. As you say, Jess Breech had to go off with a nasty cut and did not come back on. Whether that was for a failed HIA or whether they were just being precautious because of the cut, I've no idea. But for me, it was a card. Looking at past, I suppose, games, both in the men and women's side, you know, World Rugby have highlighted that we need to cut down on the high tackles. And for me, you know, Dorothy, it's a really poor tackle. I don't think that she bends at all. She's very upright, which causes that head-to-head contact. And unfortunately, Jess Breech comes out the wrong side of it. Look, from Dorothy's side of things, I am certain that there was no malice, no ill intent. You know, she did not set out to hurt her, merely to put in a big tackle, but she got it wrong. I think she was lucky with the yellow card, to be honest. Again, I'm not a referee, but just the way that World Rugby has been going on about trying to cut out these high contacts and head-to-head things, I thought the ref was going to pull out a red card. So I was very relieved to see that it was a yellow, and I'm sure Dorothy was too.
And then Sene obviously wasn't so lucky, and she got a red card at the game, but it's since been appealed. What do you make of that decision?
Again, it's another high tackle with very little mitigation for me. There's no, she doesn't duck into the tackle. Again, she's very upright. Granted, I do think she's trying to cut out the skip pass from Scarrett or the kick in behind, and that's why she's upright and her hands are kind of above her head, and then she makes the split decision to tackle. And you have to remember, this is happening very, very quickly, but it is a player's responsibility to get low, because other players, like we saw with Jess Breech, can come out with massive injuries from this. Now, Breech is lucky it was just a cut, and maybe, but like, if that's a concussion, we don't know how long that might affect her for. And I do think it was a red card at the time. I was again surprised to see it rescinded, but I'm not a referee. World Rugby have had a look at it. The citing commissioner's had a look at it, and she is free to play the weekend. But I did think that we would have had 2 red cards at the weekend, and we would have been down a lot of players. And I'm sure Sene knows that. Again, no malice, no ill intent, no desire to go out there and hurt another player, but she was high. She does make contact with Scarrett. Scarrett did have to go off for a HIA. Thankfully came back on, but it's dangerous. Like, it is a very dangerous thing. We've seen before with players. I know players myself who are out with concussion long term or have to retire because of an accidental head collision. And so we really need to get our tackle technique lower, you know, and we need to start bending from the hips. And I think it's the choke tackle that a lot of players are going for, and that's what ends up with these high upright tackles. But it is something World Rugby have been focusing on, but a lot of work needs doing on it.
And obviously the Ireland team were probably getting frustrated because they had such a successful first half, and then the tries were building in the second half. For those English players, was there any standout performances from them? Obviously, a lot of players off the bench got their tries in as well.
Yeah, look, in the first half, there wasn't really many standout English players, and it's not very often you can say that. Look, granted, they went in 10-0. Lark Davies got a try after 2 minutes, and things looked really ominous then, and I wondered what the scoreline, you know, could be. But going in at halftime, only 10-0 down, the Irish team would be much happier. You know, Scarrett missed a couple of kicks she wouldn't normally. Their maul was going quite well. Marley Packer, I thought, was excellent. But in the second half, they just took off. Marley Packer, I felt like, was everywhere. Deserved player of the match. And again, their bench just had a huge impact. I thought, actually, Helena Rowland at 15 had done really well in her kick returns. She's electric feet. She's very fast, and she kind of found a few gaps along the way. And she's a very versatile player and becoming very, very important for England. And it's interesting because she is normally a sevens player, but I think she's actually turned down a sevens contract to go with England full time and aim for that World Cup. But she's played 10 centre and a fullback this Six Nations, so her versatility has been massive for England. Look, Poppy Cleal to come off the bench, she's a world-class player. she's only coming off the bench, which is crazy to think. She scored 2 tries. Ellie Kildun came off the bench, 2 tries. She got try of the round, I think. They were excellent, but they seemed a lot more cohesive in the second half. They had a beautiful backline play, which led to a try for Lydia Thompson, I think it was, and they just ripped Ireland apart. And that just showed us how good they can be once they are cohesive and working together. But yeah, they're just incredible. Their strength and depth is exceptional, and the France game this weekend should be an unbelievable game to watch with some outrageously talented players, and I hope that we just have a cracking game that's really nice and close for the end for us neutrals.
And then obviously we knew heading into that England game we had lost players. Do you think the scoreline would have been different if we'd still had those sevens players?
Do I think we would have won the game? Absolutely not. Do I think the scoreline could have been different? We will never know. And you know, I think it's unfair on the players who put their body on the line last weekend to say that the score would have been different, because we will never know. You know, we could have had all our sevens players out there and those who were injured and missing for whatever reasons out there, and it still could have been 69-0, you know, or we could have put them out there and it could have been more than 10-0 at halftime too. Like, you know, yes, some of the sevens players and Sam Monaghan, who has been injured, have been incredible for us this campaign. We can't say whether they would have made a difference or not. Like, they're extremely talented, but I think the players that were on the pitch did the best job that they could have. As we saw in the first half, they put up a huge fight, and unfortunately the second half just got away from them a little bit.
Following Ireland's defeat to England last weekend, the Independent.ie published an article stating that the Irish women's 15 players are set to seal contracts for next season. Earlier today, we spoke with rugby journalist Stella Mills to evaluate further why professionalism is necessary for the development of Irish and international women's rugby. We requested further information on this from the IRFU, who said the decision for this will be made once the head of women's performance and pathways is appointed. This is a priority for the IRFU, but no timelines are in place yet. Stella, thank you so much for joining us here today on the Her Sport Six Nations show.
No worries, thanks for having me, guys.
So the game on the weekend, obviously Ireland, the amateur side against the professional side of England. What did you make of it?
I mean, I thought the first half was very, very strong from Ireland, to be honest. It was always going to be a really tall order for them to come in. You know, England are at home, record-breaking crowd. They're on a high win streak, and Ireland, arguably, you know, half of your team aren't there. So it's a really, really difficult one. I thought there was a lot of errors. I do still think that, and I know Jess Hayden mentioned it before when you had her on, but we still haven't seen the strongest England side that you can see. But more importantly for me, it kicked on some huge issues which are now being openly spoken about, and hopefully, you know, we're seeing some progress in terms of what that means in you know, contracts and investment and wider things for the game. Like,
I don't know about you, but like, I've been really impressed by England this tournament, but I wasn't too impressed by them in the first half. You know, I think they had a lot of mistakes. They had a lot of opportunities, and granted, they went in 10-0, but a lot of missed opportunities, a lot of handling errors, and I thought to myself, like, you know, France have been similar this tournament. Like, it's built it up to be a really good game this weekend, but, you know, like, England didn't look all too convincing in the first half. Second half, granted, things definitely changed, but I thought Ireland put it up to them really, really well in the first half.
Yeah, and there's always that kind of worry, isn't there? I mean, after the autumn internationals, they were on such a high as a team. You know, they'd just beaten the Black Ferns. You know, everyone was, you know, thinking, what can stop them and how good are they? It's always really hard to be number one because you're not chasing anything. You know, what are you going after? What are you pitting yourself up for? And perhaps, you know, there was kind of talks maybe before that it wasn't, you know, they were kind of skipping ahead this match because everything is on France. It always has been from the start, and that is not a disservice to the Ireland squad at all, but that's just kind of maybe how things have been, you know, thinking, and some strong words were obviously exchanged in the whole situation. So, you know, we just need to see what happens.
Can you just explain specifically what that means? So obviously the most obvious thing is the Irish players went home and then got up for work the next day, but what else comes into consideration with that professionalism?
I think professionalism stems way, way, way beyond money. I mean, let's be completely frank here. You don't go into playing women's rugby for the big bucks, do you? You know, they're not going into this making money. For England, so let's lay out how it is. They got to get straight onto a flight to France. They all had a day by the pool, resting, relaxing, being with the team and just getting that chance to recover. The Irish team flew back home and had to go straight to work the next day. I mean, and the biggest thing here is that it is, for an England rugby player, it's their career. It's their full-time career. It's everything, that every single decision they make in that day is hemming towards the career and the rugby. Whereas for the Irish squad, they don't get that luxury because they don't get that time. They don't get afforded that necessity. And also, when we're talking about contracts here, it's way more than money. It's about respect, because by England giving the contracts, they're saying, go on, girls, we trust you. We have so much respect for you. Let's go for it. In Ireland, there's that void at the moment. And it's kind of a bit like, well, where does that respect come? And it's almost like the union needs to kind of step up, which, we have had some things come out in the press recently to say that and say, we trust you. We're going to go for you and we're going to back you. But I think, it's about rest, it's about recovery, and it's not just about physical things either. It's about being able to have time as a team to talk about the things that went wrong, to analyze things that went right, to bond as a team. You can't just expect a team to turn up on match day and pull something out of the bag against arguably one of the best teams in the world with little to no prep. And that is, again, not a slant on the players at all, because they're doing their very, very best to have careers and then train at the same time. There's not enough hours in the day. I wrote about it recently in an article. There is simply not enough hours in the day to have a full-time career and be a full-time rugby player. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think it was really noticeable and probably opened up a lot of people's eyes. Aoife McDermott, who started in the second row for Ireland at the weekend, she had a tweet bright and early Monday morning that she was back to work, and she works as a nurse, on the front line the whole way throughout the pandemic. And I think that just to the people who maybe don't follow women's rugby as much and don't understand the amateur versus professional side of things, and what England are getting, that kind of showed people like, wow, she was playing a game only less than 24 hours ago and she's already back to work. And as you said, England had the luxury to fly straight out to France to really start preparing for the next game. But like the likes of Aoife McDermott and the rest of that squad, they couldn't even think about rugby anymore. They had to get on with their day job, make some money to live their own lives. And then only after that, when she got home from a long day of work, could she actually start to recover properly and relax and put the feet up and start focusing on the Scotland game. And it does have a massive impact, as you said, not just physically in terms of being able to put the feet up and rest and relax and recover, but also mentally, not being able to switch off fully because you have to focus on your job, and not having a rest day as such, because even on days when you're not training, you're still going to work and trying to get other bits and pieces done. It does take its toll, and we're going to see that. And I think we saw that in the second half of the England-Ireland game at the weekend, where we were week 5 of the Six Nations, and in the second half the Irish players looked tired, and that's just that's no fault of their own. They gave an immense performance in the first half, but you could see they were a little bit jaded in the second half, and it allowed England to rack up the score. I
think to play a game to that standard, like against one of the best teams in the world, and then be going into work, I think it really did show, as you were saying there, people like what it meant to play rugby for Ireland compared to having a professional contract there.
Yeah, and you're not only physically tired, you're physically sore. You wake up the next day sore. It's hard. You almost feel hungover, even though you haven't had a drink the night before, and that nobody wants to go to work feeling like that. Nobody feels fresh.
And you mentioned there, Stella, that Ireland, obviously there has been talks about bringing in contracts. It's a long time coming, I suppose, but something interesting they did say is that they wouldn't come into play until the new head of women's performance and pathways was appointed, the role for which was only just closed in the last number of days. So what do you make of of that statement from the IRFU?
You know what? I think it's one of the few things that the IRFU have got right, because these contracts cannot be rushed. You can't have them. It would be stupid for them to come out tomorrow and say, here's our contracted players, this is what we're going to do, because no thought had gone into it. And we've got to be very careful here, because there's been a lot of contracts go through in the Six Nations very, very quickly, and sometimes the best decisions aren't made there, right? So you need to consider the length of the contract, what it's going to be for the players. Is it going to be semi-professional? Is it going to be professional? Because don't forget, these women have, like you just mentioned, careers. You are asking them to give up a career and move into another career. It's no longer going to be a hobby. It's a big, big step, right? You need to get the right people behind that. You need to ensure that the squad is completely comfortable and happy with that. And some honest conversations need to hopefully happen between the IRFU and the players, because that's the only way forward, that it's going to make things a bit better, and we're going to see a hopefully really, really kind of competitive Six Nations next year.
Yeah, and it is a tricky one, as someone who's been in that position before. Contracts are a hugely positive step forward for the RFU. I do think that if we want to compete, that is the way forward that we have to go. Personally, I didn't think it would happen so soon, but like you say, you do have to be careful with that. Are the contracts going to be enough to cover the cost of living in Dublin? Are people still going to be able to pay their mortgage or their rent or whatever else with this and live a comfortable life outside of that? Are people willing to give up their careers or their studies, to take on these contracts? But I think a big thing as well is, how do you give contracts to everybody like England?
Exactly.
Or do you go like Wales and you give some full-time, some part-time? And how do you make the decision based off of that? Because I heard, again, through social media, that Wales gave out their 12 full-time and 12 part-time contracts there, but there are actually some players who were given full-time contracts who are now not really being picked in Welsh squads, or not starting for Wales. And there are players who are uncontracted or on part-time contracts who are, and you don't want to be rushed in to giving this player a full-time contract, and then actually it emerges that by the time the Six Nations comes around next season, that they're no longer a part of your plans, or they're not really a starter anymore. So you can't rush these. This can't be a knee-jerk reaction. But I do think it is hugely positive for the RFU, and I hope that they can work it out, that we can retain our best players, put them on their full-time contracts, and we can actually develop them and see how far we go. But it'll be interesting to see, were there any maybe players who are planning on retiring at the end of this Six Nations because of the toll that rugby has been taking and the time it's been taken out of their social life and everything else. Now with the offer of contracts, might they go, well, why not for a year? Why not have the opportunity to be a professional rugby player? Something that a lot of them thought they would never, ever get that opportunity. So it will be interesting to see whether a few of those maybe veterans hang around when they weren't initially planning on.
And Greg McWilliams as well, after the game, he also, I suppose, said the need for professional contracts was there. And something he said was that they need to come in before Ireland lose sight of the likes of England and France. If Ireland did get their contracts over the next year, how long do you think it would take them to catch up with England? Or even do you think they can catch up at this stage?
I think there's always room to catch up, but it's a matter of a long period of time. Let's not forget here that England have not been professional for 2 days, 2 weeks. They've been professional for a long time. And the other thing that we have to recognise here is the pathways. We have a huge reserve of players waiting to just come on through thanks to the Alliance Prem. We can't that feeds the England team to no avail. So how quickly they're going to catch up will largely depend. And again, it's not going to, you can't throw money at this to just make it disappear. There has to be infrastructural changes, there has to be big decisions. There probably has to be some more coaching staff that are going to be brought into the fold, and kind of, different things like nutrition and S&C, and how does that all come into play? Because at the moment, for these teams that aren't fully professional, they're largely doing all of this on their own. They're doing their own gym. Yes, they get plans and things like that, but they're doing gym sessions in their own time. And how is that going to kind of, shapeshift and move things towards? And there's going to be teething problems. Like, we can't lie and just say, as soon as you're giving, that is a lot of kind of what I'm hearing is, oh, as soon as we're giving contracts, everything will magically be better. No, the hard graft starts now. It's choosing those contracts and then it's moving towards, I think, but then that being said, I could eat my words, because look at Wales. They got professional contracts, and I was the first to think, okay, it's not going to make a huge difference, but they came out of the blocks firing. So is it a mental shift? It does something mentally shift in a player's mind, and they unlock a new level. Who knows?
Yeah, it is. Like, it's an interesting one. I don't think, by Ireland getting contracts tomorrow, that come the next Six Nations, they'll suddenly be favourites to win. I agree with you, Stella, that I think England have been, one of the best sides in the world for a long time, because they have been professional for so long. And for Ireland, this just needs to be an improvement. We just need to see them improve, because we saw in the first half of the Ireland-England game, like, the passion is there, the drive is there, the talent is there. It's just about using every single resource we have available to us to make sure that we are in a prime position come match day to be able to perform, and that the thing about contracts we'll bring in is those little bit of 1%ers, as I call them, like that extra time to sleep and get 8 hours instead of 7 hours every day because you're not going to work. To have an extra hour or two on the couch to put the feet up and not be stressing about work, to be able to have time to meal prep and refuel and hydrate yourself properly. They're all little 1% that can make a huge, huge difference in a game. And I think that's what we'll see change over the next course of the Six Nations campaign. But do I think it'll put us in a position to win the Six Nations next year? No. But will we have closed the gap? Yes, I think so.
And Italy obviously became the latest team to announce it. And myself and Hannah thought it was interesting, just the timing of it, like halfway through the tournament. What did you make of their announcement?
It was smart. It was a very smart announcement to announce it halfway through the tournament. I did think going into this that we'd see some form of professionalization of one of the few teams that are left over to do it. I think it's a smart choice and a good thing to do it. It's an interesting bit of timing, and I wonder how long this was kind of in the pipeline for. Obviously these things never happen overnight, but I do wonder how far back they kind of started those conversations with, because let's not forget that this Six Nations has been record breaking. I think the viewing figures have just come out here for the BBC, and insane. Like, not only are we seeing record breaking crowds, but the actual interest of the sport is growing phenomenally quickly. So it makes unions look almost silly that they're behind the mark and not kind of investing where fans are investing in this. Why aren't unions? So I think it was smart timing.
And the IRFU obviously haven't released a timeline for Ireland to get these contracts, but what sort of timeline would you like to see? Like, when do you think it would be appropriate to bring in these contracts?
I think they need to, as I said before, they need to get their basics sorted first. And I think it's good that they've publicly committed to it, because that's what we wanted to see, right, with the kind of outcry after the match. I do think that I wouldn't be too upset if it did take, a few weeks, months to kind of come into play, as long as we were reassured that the conversations were happening in depth behind closed doors. So yeah, weeks, months probably is my gut feeling on that.
I wonder, and again, it's just my opinion, but I wonder, will they kind of put that offer out after the summer tour that was just announced? Because I know Greg mentioned that he had a couple of under-18 players he was really interested in and he thought could make the step up. So I wonder, will they almost use that summer tour as an opportunity or a trial for players to kind of stake a claim for contracts that are going forward? Because again, you don't want to rush into any of this. You don't want to be picking players for contracts who, won't be part of your plans. And I think that could be a very smart way of going about things. Give them a bit of a trial, say, here you go, here's your opportunity. You're all going to get a good amount of game time against Japan, who are pretty good opposition, who are going to the World Cup. And And then from there, you know, around September time, kind of kick in with contracts, which gives you a nice build up to the Six Nations. And there's time to develop there. I also think there's a lot of players in the squad are quite young and are still students and are teachers and that. And kind of with the school year starting in September, you know, it might align perfectly to kick off that contract then so that they can sort out their studies or defer or to career breaks or whatever else. It might work that way, but that's just my thinking, and maybe that's me being a teacher hoping that that's the way they go to help ease the students and the teachers in that regard.
And then obviously we know they're not coming in until this new role is appointed. And in that role of women's performance and pathways, who would you like to see in that position?
Who would I like to see? It's funny because with the Black Ferns kind of situation that's just happened, obviously we've got a new kind of director and manager there. And the thing that struck me about that was somebody who, straight off the blocks, I think the quote for the press release was pretty savage and to the point. And I personally would like to see somebody who, and kind of basically not hold their hands up, but say, look, we've got a lot to work on here. This is what we need to do, and this is how we need to do it. In terms of who's right for that role, I don't know. I don't know the answers to that, but the characteristics behind it need to be truthful, honest, and I think they need to be somebody who's willing to communicate and listen to the squad and what's kind of best for them.
I personally would love to see somebody like Lynn Cantwell, who is performance director of women's rugby down in South Africa. Now, to be honest, chances of getting her are very slim, but even somebody with similar, I suppose, characteristics, like you say, she's a great leader. She's very well respected within the IRFU. She obviously has massive experience within that role. She has played for Ireland. She's been there through some good times and some bad times. And she comes very, very well respected for what she does. However, I don't think we're going to poach her from South Africa this quickly because she's not there too long. But yeah, like Stella said, somebody just that cares about women's rugby, that knows exactly what is needed to put us on the pathway to success and improvement. And who knows that this isn't going to happen overnight, that it's going to take time, that there's going to be teething problems that they can overcome, but that someone who's willing to be able to work with the players as well to make sure, you know, the players feel included in how this is going to be run, because at the end of the day, without the players, you have nothing, you know, and we don't want to be in a situation like we were before where we have that 7s and 15s annoyance or grievances and splits and everything else, and you know, one member of the IRFU getting a lot of grief, and that we don't need that background noise. At the end of the day, we want to focus on what's happening on the pitch. But for that to go smoothly, we need to have everything off the pitch smoothly. And I just hope we get somebody who's really passionate to change and to help women's rugby, because the potential for growth there is massive. So it is and it will be interesting to see who they appoint. And whoever it is, I wish them well, but it's not an easy task.
No, and I think it'll be interesting to see if it's, I suppose we're expecting someone that we do know and a familiar face, but if it's not, that might be an interesting choice on the IRFU's behalf as well, maybe.
But it mightn't be a bad choice. Sometimes, you know, a fresh face, you know, someone who's coming in with new ideas and new ways of approaching things can almost be a good thing, you know, and sometimes when you have somebody who's already known within the setup, you know, they kind of sometimes might come in with blinkers on and don't actually see other opportunities that are there. So, you know, whoever it is, as I said, I just hope that this goes right, because we, as I said, from that first half, we can see there's talent there. We can see there's desire and passion, and we need to use this opportunity with the way women's rugby is around the world at the minute to pounce on that and improve.
And Stella, just in terms of the next Six Nations, obviously this Six Nations, the focus was kind of on good rugby, like getting more attendance, more coverage of women's rugby, but we obviously knew that a lot of the matches weren't ever going to be even, and we knew the outcomes before they were even played. But for the next Six Nations, if contracts come in, what would you expect to see from that, or what do you hope changes in women's rugby by then?
I think the more competitive the matches get, the more coverage you're going to get, because sport is supposed to be competitive. You don't want to go into a match with a foregone conclusion, and I think in a lot of these matches that there was foregone conclusions. Don't get me wrong, there was a few kind of spanners in the works, which we all love to see as fans and on the edge of our seats, in the last few minutes. But I think, hopefully we're going to see more matches that are edge of your seat stuff. And I think, primarily working myself in a work marketing and PR background, fans need to see things that excite them. You want to, this is how you get our sport into the next generation and to different fan groups. People who have never even watched men's rugby, are becoming fans of women's rugby because they're seeing these clippets online, these highlight reels, and they're getting excited for it. And I think, what we've done in a very short space of time with this Six Nations is exceptional. Okay, you can't fault that in terms of the crowds, the coverage, things like that. But what we can now do, limitless, because if you give the teams what they need and the support they need, they're only going to improve, which means the matches are also going to improve. So people are going to get excited, people are really going to want to go and watch matches. It's not just going to be a foregone conclusion in that sense.
Yeah, I really think that the World Cup this year will have a huge knock-on effect for the Six Nations, in that hopefully you get lots of coverage both in Ireland, the UK and around the world. And as you say, you're going to see the best teams in the world play there, and there should be some excellent matches with intriguing matchups. And as you said, you want to see those bits of skills. I mentioned this at the start of the Six Nations. You want to see clips going viral. So the Sam Monaghan offload, Ellie Kildun's try at the weekend, they are the things that people kind of catch. They're not into rugby, but they see a highlight reel on Instagram, and they click in, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, the next game's down the road for me. I'll go and watch that because that was brilliant. Seeing Twitter constantly announcing that there are match records or attendance records being broken, they kind of catch the eye of people. And I think with the World Cup this year, hopefully New Zealand put on a big show and all the teams coming, we can have some cracking matches, and that kind of flows over into the Six Nations. And yeah, hopefully we get some really competitive games. And I still think England and France will run away with it next year, but that some other matches will be much more competitive and highly contested.
Yeah, so hopefully we're back, I suppose, for the next Six Nations, talking about how more competitive they will be, and even putting up more of a fight against England and France, because at the end of the day, they know they're the better team, so there's not much competition they're going out to play against that they don't know, that they know they're going to win most of the time. But Stella, thank you so much for coming on to talk to us today, and we really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll be talking again for the next Six Nations.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, guys.
So as well as the Ireland and England game last weekend, we also had Italy and Scotland and France and Wales. Italy and Scotland, the scoreline there was 20-13. What did you think of that game?
Yeah, look, we actually saw some really good rugby from Italy. I thought it'd be a little tighter. I actually thought it'd be a lot high scoring, or more high scoring than it was. But Scotland were in complete control of that game at half time, and I don't know what happened after that, but Italy came firing out the blocks, and for me, they were deserving of their win based on the second half performance that they put in. But Scotland will be extremely disappointed that they were ahead at half time. They were in complete control, and then they let that fall. And this weekend's game against Ireland, if they don't win, they'll have no wins this Six Nations. And they're going to the World Cup for the first time, and they came into this Six Nations on the back of qualifying for that World Cup. And I really thought they'd come in with a lot of confidence and do quite well, but it just hasn't worked for them. But they could be dangerous for Ireland this weekend, because they don't want to be the only team without a win. And so it would be something Ireland really needs to look out for.
Mm-hmm. And then the France and Wales game, 33-5. Obviously, France now are going to take on England. Did you think the scoreline might have been a bit bigger there, or did you expect it?
Yeah, look, France are very capable of scoring more than 33 points, but what we've seen mostly this season or this championship, is that they come out firing in the blocks in the first half, and then the second half they tend to get a little bit more disjointed. What we saw is they started to actually rest a lot of their big players, and I presume that was because of this weekend's game. But yeah, they took off the likes of Sansus and Fall and that to rest them, who've been huge for them over the last couple of weeks, with an eye to the England game coming in. So it did get a little bit disjointed in the second half, but they had the game fairly well wrapped up. Still not a great performance from them. It'll be interesting to see their team this weekend. They have a couple of injuries. England have a couple of injuries, but Drouin is still out at 10. I thought Tremoulier did a good job there, but they're still kind of chopping and changing. I don't think they've found their best 15 yet. So I can't wait to see the team they have out, and it should be a cracking game. But they were easy winners in that game. Wales didn't really put it up to them, but I'm sure they'd be delighted that they did get a try in there.
And there has been, I suppose, a few errors from both France and England over the past few games. England, obviously, with their first half against Ireland. France have had a few just messy penalties and things. What do you think they'll both be kind of looking to play this weekend for the Grand Slam decider?
I suppose with those mistakes and stuff, like, it shows you that regardless of whether you're professional or not, that there are unforced errors. You know, nobody's perfect. You'll still make mistakes. You'll still give away penalties. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed to win a game or have the perfect performance, but this weekend's game, I think, will be a really cagey affair. You know, France will still try to play their offloading game that they love in front football, whereas England's pack will really be trying to get on the front foot so they can release those electric backs that they have. You know, it's in France, so the atmosphere will be massive. I'm expecting a huge crowd there. Probably to start, it'd be a big kicking game to try and get a bit of territory, and who can, you know, I suppose, rattle the other team and who can keep their composure. But I'd say England are shading it and are favourites to win. They've won the last 8 meetings between them, and France haven't won since 2018. But again, France are at home. You know, England didn't look too great in the first half of last weekend. I'm sure France will watch that and go, this team can be got at. Like, we can really go at them if we start fast. So whichever team I think gets the better start and can keep the penalties and the unforced errors to a minimum should win this game. But I'm hoping it's a tight one.
And Sarah Hunter, obviously England captain, ruled out. I suppose very disappointing for her for this last match.
Yeah, look, she's been an exceptional leader for England for a very long time, and to play in all the games and then be ruled out for this one with a rib injury, it is tough to take. But you know, they've Poppy Cleall on the bench to come on, and you know, she was nominated for World Player of the Year last year. She's an unbelievable replacement to have, and yes, they'll miss the leadership and that, but Poppy Cleall's very well able, and I'm sure they have another exceptional player to come onto the bench. Just shows the depth that England have. You know, France have their injury worries, like I mentioned about Drouin, so yeah, it'll be seen. But I suppose with Hunter's injury, it shows how physical the game was and how hard the Irish were hitting last week that she had to go off. And there was a moment when the camera went to her last weekend. She was looking a bit sorry for herself there in the crowd, and I'm sure the Irish players will take a bit of heart from that.
And then in terms of Ireland, at the start of the Six Nations show, we wanted 3 home wins. That obviously didn't happen with the game against Wales, but now we have the chance for our second win. Do you think we'll be able to get it?
Yeah, I do. There's a lot of factors that will come into play. As I said, Scotland are going to be wounded animals. You know, they don't want to be the only team to not win a game. They'll be looking for a huge victory here just to boost their morale before heading to the World Cup. Ireland, on the other hand, will definitely, do we have the talent and players and the ability to beat Scotland? Absolutely, based on the first half performance we saw last weekend. However, it's a very tight turnaround. We seem to have lost a couple of players through injury at the weekend. You know, Emer Consign's going to be missing. We're yet to see will Nicole Cronin come through. Thankfully, Sene's red card's been rescinded, so she is available to play if she is selected. Whether Sam Monaghan comes back from injury or not, it's yet to be seen. I really hope she can, because she'll be a big presence. But again, Aoife Wafer's out injured again. So it's going to be difficult. This is really going to test Ireland. I think it's going to be their biggest test to date. The Wales game, we had our full squad. Didn't happen for us. The Italy game, we had our full squad, and it did. We put in a performance. But this will be a challenge because we will not have anywhere near our full strength squad, and we're asking a lot of players, and it will really test our depth. But I do think we still have enough quality in that squad to beat a Scotland side who haven't really set the world alight this campaign.
And who would you like to see on that starting team? Would you make any changes from last week?
Well, we have to make changes. With Emer Constantine gone off the wing, I'm expecting someone like Laura Sheehan to come off the bench. You know, she has a couple of caps already. She's been in and out of squads over the last number of years. She's got great pace and she's really worked on her defence. I'm assuming she'll come in and complement Aoife Doyle on that left wing. I presume Molly Scuffin McCabe will keep her full back position there. But whether, you know, if Nicole Crone doesn't come through, either they'll send Enya Breen to 10 and then Michelle Claffy will come into the centre along with Sene, since she's cleared to play, but they could also choose to put Nikki Cohey into 10 and leave Enya at centres there. But I expect the pack to be unchanged unless Sam Monaghan is available again, which I really hope she is. But it is a big it's a big ask for this team at the weekend, and this will really determine where we're at.
So last week, Hannah was joined by Emer Constantine and Will Connors to discuss how each of them got into their rugby journey for representing Ireland and the importance of sevens rugby to the development to them as a player. After that, I'll be back in studio with Hannah Tyrrell, but a quick reminder that you're listening to the Her Sports Six Nations show, brought to you in association with Opel, the exclusive car partner to the IRFU.
My mum wanted me to do ballet. Yeah.
Stop.
My mum wanted me to do ballet.
I actually said that just out of pure joke.
Yeah,
She actually wanted you to do ballet?
Yeah, she wanted me to do ballet, but the thing was, I was in school. You got a medal whenever you'd go home if you fell on the yard for the day. So I was coming home every day with this bloody medal. My parents were like, "What's going on? What's this medal he keeps winning?" So the teacher pulled my parents aside on a parent-teacher meeting and was like, "Look, Will's going home crying every day, and it's like, do you know, maybe we should get him into sports or something." And my dad was like, because I wasn't playing football, I was like, we'll get him into rugby first and we'll kind of throw him in there. So I don't know, was it kind of a winning mentality that I just wanted to always go home and medal, or I was just soft underbelly?
There was definitely no ballet in my story anyway. Completely different. I started rugby when I was 23. So it came from, I suppose, a long career of Gaelic football and camogie, playing for Clare. Moved up to Dublin and got a call, I suppose, around the time they were trying to scout players like yourself, I suppose, to come play rugby who had come from other backgrounds, just to make a chance and try and qualify for that 2016 Olympics. The player pool was really small at the time, so came through that way and was kind of taught every individual skill in isolation with 4 or 5 of us in a small group. And I suppose you won't forget either that trip we had to San Diego, where it was my very first rugby trip. I'd never tackled anyone, and Stacey Flood and myself were on the bed in that hotel, and she was like, this is how you tackle. Like, I'd only done tackle pads, done things in isolation, but never actually played a full contact game. And we went up against the USA, Canada. Like, I actually would cringe when I looked back at the footage of those games. But look, thrown in the deep end, you either sink or you swim. I definitely sank that day, but I'm still here anyway.
So following on from the Ireland and England game, how did you get on with your fantasy rugby team last week?
Yeah, look, another good round. A little bit disappointing. I put Jess Breech as my captain, and unfortunately, as we've discussed, she had to go off early enough.
You might have to have some words with Dorothy Walls there.
Yeah. So I didn't get too many points from her. I did have Scarrett in my team, and I should have made her captain because she got me loads of points. But yeah, I think I've fallen off top of the leaderboard there. But I'm pretty happy. I'm in the mix. So
for the next game, who are you going to have in there?
Again, I'm going to wait to see what teams come out, but it is going to be. I'm definitely putting a lot of Irish players in there because I do think we can get a win against Scotland. Again, England and France, you can't go wrong. They've been a couple of my go-tos there, the likes of Sansus and Fall. I don't know if I'll keep Breech my captain. I'll have to see how I go. But yeah, I don't know. It is a tricky one. It's hard. Teams come out. I always have an idea of what players I want to put in my team, and then the official teams come out. And particularly with England and France, there have been so many changes each week. I've had to make a few adjustments, but definitely keeping Scarrett, Kildun, Sansus, Tremoulier if she's there for me, if she's starting for France. A couple of Welsh in there, a couple of Scottish, and then I bring in my Irish again. Sam Monaghan's definitely going in there if she's playing.
And is there any Ireland players that would get a look in that haven't on your team before? Any that impressed you last week?
Yeah, look, like, to be honest, I've been really impressed with the likes of Christy Haney in her first campaign. So she's definitely worth a look this weekend. I thought she's really shored up our scrum. In the England game last weekend, like, England have an extremely dominant pack and their set piece has been excellent. And we got two, I think we got a penalty and a free kick from the first two scrums, and that rattled England a bit. So, like, Christy Haney's done a great job in there. I have Linda in my team already, so she's going to stay there. And if I take Sam, I've only one other chance, so I'll have to see who I pick there. But you never know. Maybe Aoife Doyle on the wing could get a call up.
could be lucky enough to be on your team. And then ahead of the games this weekend, so England and France, obviously the big one. You've said earlier you do expect England to win, but what do you think the scoreline will be there?
Maybe not expect England win. I think they might win. Don't know if I want them to win. I will go with an England win, but I do hope that it's a tight game. But France just can be so hit and miss, much like their men's team. They can be really inconsistent. I'm hoping it'll be something like 24-22 to England, or something really tight like that. I'm just hoping it's a really good game to watch, to be honest, and that, again, it gets people wanting to watch rugby, play rugby, get involved, go to matches, because that is, unfortunately, the pick of the game for the weekend. It is Le Crunch, the title decider. Teams are going for a Grand Slam, so I'm expecting big hits, big offloads, great tries.
And then, obviously, before that game, we have the Wales and Italy match. What would you expect the score to be there?
Given how Wales have gone this weekend, I think they could shade it. But again, Italy will take a lot of confidence from their win last weekend. And on their day, they can be very, very good. But what Wales have shown us this weekend, or this campaign, I think they could win it again. I expect it to be quite a high-scoring game, so maybe something like 30-27 to Wales.
30-27. And then Ireland and Scotland, 8 o'clock, so it'll be after I suppose, the Grand Slam, but Ireland will still be looking to get their second win of the whole championship. What score would you like to see there?
I'm going to go for an Ireland win here. I really do think, based off what they showed us last week, they're really capable of some really good rugby. Their set piece and all that has improved. They, like the likes of Aoife Doyle, and if Laura Sheehan comes onto the wing, they're pacey wingers with good feet, and we can move them the ball. Like, if we can get them the ball, they can score. I think it'll be a little bit of a lower scoring game, so maybe something like 19-12 to Ireland, I'm going to say.
So 19-12 to Ireland. So obviously it's the last round of the matches, England and France, the Grand Slam decider. Taking everything from the campaign, what do you hope people are left with from the campaign? Like competitive rugby, hopefully with this last match, but obviously we've seen breakthrough crowds, like the coverage of it. What do you hope people take from it?
I hope that people have realised that women's rugby is a great spectacle to watch, and that, there's some unbelievably talented players across all the nations there, and that it's exciting and entertaining, and that it draws people in, and that they now are kind of hooked into that rugby of, like, I want to watch, doesn't matter if it's men or women's rugby, and that I want to go, and maybe I want to get involved in playing rugby itself, because what we're trying to do is grow the game, get more people watching, get more people playing, get more people involved in whatever way that they can, and I hope it's just excited people and opened their eyes to the fact that this is a great sport to watch, and just because it's women's rugby doesn't diminish it in any way. There's still some unbelievable skill and talent there, and hopefully that's been seen over the last couple of weeks.
And you'd imagine with the coverage that this Six Nations has got, it's only going to build from here. So I think it's really exciting to think about what the next one might look like.
Absolutely. This is a stepping stone, and year on year, campaign after campaign, we need to be building on these opportunities to be able to improve the game, because the more people we get involved, whether that's on the sidelines or actually playing itself, is only going to improve the skill level and the quality. And as we've seen over the last couple of years, that has improved immensely. And it just means that we're getting more competitive matches, we're getting more entertaining matches, and more people then want to come and watch it. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So speaking of fantasy rugby, obviously it's all been about me, but how's your team doing?
I don't think my team has gotten very far, owing to the fact I'm struggling to work out how the fantasy rugby is played. It's not my forte. I think I was putting people in the wrong positions for a while, because even on the England team, they can play in number of positions, and then they weren't actually playing when the games came out.
I would agree. So
I think I was having technical difficulties.
Women's Six Nations, if you're listening, please let us put players in multiple positions, because I agree. I wanted to play Stacey Flood. She's been playing as the centre for Ireland this year, but I could only pick her as an out half or as a 10, and that was really frustrating. And that's why last year, I'm going to hope, that is why my own wife dropped me for Baven, because I played a 10, but I was down as a winger on the fantasy rugby, and she had to make that ultimate choice and chose Baven. But if she had been able to move me around, she could have maybe wanted to pick me at 10. Maybe she still wouldn't have picked me, but anyway, so it's not going too well for you.
Yeah, no,
there's still one round left, you never know.
That's what I'm going to put down for my reasoning anyway. But this has been episode 6 of the Her Sport Six Nations show, brought to you in association with Opel, the exclusive car partner to the IRFU. You can catch up on this episode and every episode in the series on YouTube and our social channels, or listen to the podcast on every podcast app. And for our final competition, once again, we are giving you 2 tickets to see Ireland take on Scotland at the Kingspan Stadium in Belfast this weekend, and a signed Irish Rugby jersey. For your chance to win, answer this question. Who did Hannah Tyrrell make her international debut against in 2015? Comment below with the correct answer and we'll pick our winner tomorrow. Comment your answers on Instagram and Twitter with the hashtag #HerSportsSixNations.
Her Sports Six Nations Show in association with Opel.